Goodness. Alrighty. Welcome to Storytime with Nanny. And this is day 11. And we're going to start with the book that we were in on our last day, which is Pathways of Gold. And it is an Abeka book. And it is illustrated by Mike Davis and Frank Higgs. It says the editor is Laurel Higgs. And we are going to start with the story about, it's called Pumpkin Seed. It was spring, the day was sunny for a change, and Karen and Charlie were all ready to go to the creek to fish. Charlie cut new poles and hunted up hooks while Karen packed a lunch. They were out behind the barn digging bait when Father came around the corner and saw them. "I've just been looking for you two," he said. "I want you to take these pumpkin seeds down to the cornfield and the bottom pasture and plant them. It won't take long, and when you finish, you may go fishing." Karen and Charlie were disappointed. This was the first good day for fishing all spring. It seemed awful to have to give it up now, even for an hour or two. With long faces, they started for the cornfield. Charlie carried the poles and the bait, and Karen took the lunch and the paper sack of pumpkin seed. They arrived at the lower field and began to work, but the creek just a little farther down the road looked too inviting. How could they think of work on a day like this? "Are the worms still alive?" asked Karen. "I'll check," said Charlie. "What's the use of planting these old pumpkins anyway?" said Karen. "Father already planted some in the upper cornfield." "I know what," Charlie cried. "See this old stump? Let's hide the sack of seed there and come back tomorrow to plant it." "Well," said Karen, "are you sure it would be all right?" "Come on," said Charlie. "I want to go fishing. No one will ever know." They buried the seed in the old rotten stump, covered it with soil, and hurried away to the creek to fish. By late afternoon, the two had caught half a dozen fish, enough for the whole family. They carried them home, and Mother fried them for supper. But this time, everyone had forgotten about the pumpkin seeds. Karen remembered them that night as she lay in bed. "I wish we had stayed and planted them as Father said," she thought. "Oh well, Charlie and I will do it first thing in the morning, and then everything will be all right." But everything was not all right. When Karen woke up the next morning, it was raining. It rained all that day, and the next, and the next. By the time the rain stopped, Karen and Charlie had both forgotten all about the pumpkin seeds again. One Saturday morning, several weeks later, Karen was practicing a Bible verse for Sunday school. She said it over and over to herself so she would remember it. Suddenly, the meaning of the verse came to her, and she was surprised to find that it had something to do with her. The verse was, "Be sure your sin will find you out." The pumpkin seed, Karen thought in a flash. We forgot about the pumpkin seed, and that verse says that Father is sure to find out about it. That night, Karen couldn't sleep. She kept thinking how wrong it had been for her and Charlie to deceive Father about the pumpkin seed. "We meant to go back and plant them," she told herself. "But still, we did wrong." When she finally fell asleep, she dreamed that the room was full of pumpkins with ugly, grinning faces like jack-o'-lanterns. They laughed at her and came closer and closer until she awoke with a frightened cry. In the morning, Charlie and Karen had a talk. "We need to tell Father right away," Karen said. "We did wrong, and we need to tell the truth about it." Charlie finally agreed, and they decided to confess to Father right after lunch. You can imagine how surprised they were at what happened next. At lunch, before they had told Father anything, he made an announcement to the whole family. I have decided that Karen and Charlie may have the pumpkins that they planted in the bottom cornfield, he said. They'll make good jack-o'-lanterns for Halloween, and the ones that are left over they can sell for 10 cents a piece. Think of that, 10 cents a piece for all the pumpkins they had planted. And they knew there wouldn't be a single pumpkin. Karen looked across the table at Charlie, and his face was very red. When Father left the table, they both followed him. They told him about the pumpkin seeds and how the Bible verse had started them thinking and how they were very sorry now. Father listened without a word until they finished. Then he said, I've known for a long time what you did with the pumpkin seed. I've just been waiting for you to come to me. I believe you have learned a lesson which you will not forget. But how did you find out, Father? Karen and Charlie cried. Come with me, said Father. I want to show you something. Wonderingly, without a word, they followed Father to the cornfield and straight to where the old rotten stump had been. When they got there, they could not see the stump. There were pumpkin vines all over it. Not big, strong vines like the ones that grew in the cornfields, but thin, sickly vines crowding each other for space. The soil in the stump had been so rich that the seeds had sprouted their way through the sack and up to the light and air. The vines told Father where the pumpkin seeds were as plainly as if they could have spoken, and they did seem to speak to Karen and Charlie. They said, be sure your sins will find you out. How glad they were then that they had confessed to Father and he had forgiven them. So they didn't do right because they didn't do the chore that their dad told them to. And come to find out, had they done it, they would have gotten a blessing out of that, wouldn't they? They would have gotten their own pumpkins, and then they could have sold some pumpkins. So they did tell the truth, and their dad forgave them, didn't he? And the next story that we're going to read is called The Nail. A merchant, meaning that's someone that sells things that we buy. A merchant had done a good business at the fair. He had sold his wares and had lined his money bags with gold and silver. Then he wanted to travel homeward and be at his own house before nightfall. So he packed his trunk with the money, placed it on his horse, and rode away. At noon he rested in a town. When he wanted to go on, the stable boy brought out the horse and said, A nail is missing, sir, in the shoe of the hind foot, the shoe that the horse wears. Let it be missing, answered the merchant. The shoe will certainly stay on for the 6 miles I have still to go. I am in a hurry. In the afternoon, when he stopped once more and had his horse fed, the stable boy came to him and said, Sir, a shoe is missing from your horse's left hind foot. Shall I take him to the blacksmith? Let it be missing, answered the man. The horse can very well go on for the 2 miles that I have yet to go. I am in haste. Meaning he was in a hurry. He rode forth, but before long the horse began to limp. He had not limped long before he began to stumble. He had not stumbled long before he fell down and broke a leg. The merchant was forced to leave the horse where it was and carry the trunk home himself. He did not get there till late at night, and that unlucky nail, said he to himself, has caused all this trouble. And that's not really what caused all the trouble, is it? The merchant's blaming the nail from coming loose on the horse's shoe. That had he listened to the young boy that tried to tell him, he would help him get it fixed. He didn't want to take time to do it, and it ended up causing him a lot of trouble, not to mention it wasn't good for the horse either, was it? Hey, Little Belle, let's move back for a little bit, okay? You can come sit with Mom in a little bit. Not now. I'm up here with all my books and there's not much room for you right now. I know. The next story we're going to read is the story of a turnip. One day, a poor servant found a very large turnip in his garden. "I will carry it to the king," said he, "and offer it to him as a gift. He is always pleased when we have good crops in our gardens and fields." So he carried the turnip to the castle. The king took it and admired its great size and beauty. Then, after saying some kind words to the poor man, he gave him 3 gold pieces. Now there was a farmer living near the village who was very rich, and who was always wanting to be richer. He heard about the kindness which the king had shown to the poor servant, and about the money which he had given him. "I have a big calf," he said, which is a baby cow, "the largest and finest calf in this country. I will take it to the king and offer it as a free gift." If he gave 3 gold pieces for a turnip, how much more will he give for such a beautiful calf? So he tied a rope around the calf's neck and led it to the castle. "My good king," he said, "here is the calf which I have fed and brought up with great care, so that I might show my love for you by offering you a gift. I pray that you will take it with my best wishes." But the king understood what was on the mind of the farmer, and he said that he did not want any calf. The man begged very hard that he would take the gift. He would never be happy, he said, if he should have to take the calf back home. "Very well," said the wise king, "since you wish me to do so, I will take it. And that you may know how well I think of you, I will give you a present which cost me at least 3 times as much as your calf is worth." Saying these words, he gave the farmer the big turnip, which led to the gift making. And the farmer, as he went sadly home, thought to himself that for one time in his life he had done a very foolish thing. The king knew what was in the rich farmer's heart, didn't he? He knew that he was just out to try to see what kind of gift he was going to get from the king for giving him a gift. So it was greed that was in his heart. It wasn't that he was giving it out of love like the poor farmer. And the king was wise and knew that. And this is an interesting story. It's called the India, which is a country, Rubber Man. Many years ago, a strange-looking man lived in the city of New York. His cap was made of India rubber. So was his coat. Even his necktie was made of rubber. He wore rubber shoes in dry weather. People called this man the India Rubber Man. His real name was Charles Goodyear. He was very poor, but he had a job to do. He was trying to find out how to make India rubber useful. Rubber trees grow in South America. The juice of these trees is something like milk or cream. Men take the juice out of the trees and then dry it to make rubber. The Indians in Brazil had no glass to make bottles with. A long time ago, they learned to make bottles out of rubber. Someone brought some of these rubber bottles to the United States. The people in this country had never seen rubber before. They thought that the rubber bottles made by the Indians were very strange. In this country, rubber was used only to rub out pencil marks. That is why we call it rubber. People in South America learned to make a kind of heavy shoe out of it, but these shoes were hard to make and they cost a great deal when they were sold in the United States. Men tried to make rubber shoes in this country with rubber from Brazil. The American shoes were cheaper, but they were no good. In winter they would freeze until they were as hard as stones, and that was not the worst of it. In summer they would melt. Goodyear was trying to find out a way to make rubber better. He wanted to get it so that it would not melt in summer. He wanted to get a rubber that would not get hard in cold weather. The first rubber coats that were made so that were made so hard in cold weather that they would stand alone and look like a man. Goodyear wanted to try the rubber he had worked on. That is why he wore a rubber necktie. That is why he wore a rubber cap and rubber shoes. Even when it was not raining, he made paper out of rubber and wrote a book on it. He had a door plate made of it. He even carried a cane made of India rubber. It was no wonder people called him the India Rubber Man. He was very poor. Sometimes he had to borrow money to buy rubber. Sometimes his friends gave money to keep his family from starving. Sometimes there was no wood and no coal in the house, even on cold weather. But Goodyear kept on trying. He knew that he would find a way. Years went by, and still he kept on trying. One day he was mixing some rubber with a yellow stuff called sulfur. It slipped out of his hand and fell onto the hot stove, but it did not melt. Goodyear was happy at last. That night it was cold. Goodyear took the burnt piece of rubber out of the outside, and he nailed it to the kitchen door outside. When morning came, he went and got it. It was not frozen. At last he had discovered a way to make rubber useful. Now poor men who had to stand in the rain could keep themselves dry. People could walk in the wet with dry feet. A great many people are alive who would have died if they had not been kept dry by Indian rubber. You may count on how many useful things are made of rubber. We owe them all to one man. People laughed at Goodyear once, but at last they praised him. To be the India Rubber Man was something to be proud of. So at first people thought, he wasn't that smart. Come to find out, he really was, and became very useful for a lot of people. And a lot of the tires that we have on our cars and ride around in each day are the Goodyear name brand tires. So some of us still have his name on the tires we ride on. They still make those tires. So he persevered, and then he stuck to it even though it was hard. And it came out not just for his good and his family's good, but everyone's good, didn't it? Now, the next story is called The Apple Branch. It was the month of May. There was a branch of beautiful blossoms on an old apple tree. One day, a fair princess came driving by. When she saw the blossoms, she said, "Oh, how beautiful! I must have some of them." So the coachman stopped the horses and cut the branch for her. When they reached the castle, the princess carried the apple branch into her room. It was a lovely room. The princess put the branch into a tall and very costly silver vase. She placed the vase in one of the windows. "Oh, how beautiful," she said, as she looked at the blossoms, and "how beautiful," said all who saw it. Soon the apple branch grew very proud. It looked out towards the garden and fields, where it saw a great many flowers growing. "There is a great difference between the plain flowers and myself," it said. "How unhappy they must be. No one would care to pick those common yellow dandelions, but I suppose there must be some plain flowers." A sunbeam kissed the yellow dandelions in the field. Then it kissed the apple branch and said, "Is there such a difference between the flowers? What is the plant you think so ugly?" The dandelion answered the apple branch, "The princess would not think of picking one of them. When they go to seed, they look like wool, but then they are only weeds. How glad I am that I am not a weed." When the wind whispered to the dandelions what the apple branch had said, they pulled their little green sunbonnets down over their faces. They wondered if they really were so ugly. One little dandelion peeped out at its dear old white gray-haired grandmother and said, "Surely no one could be more beautiful than she." While the dandelions were feeling so bad, a group of children came across the fields. When they saw the host of yellow dandelions, they laughed and clapped their hands for joy. They picked them, They made chains and curls and crowns of them. They blew the feathery seeds away. And the sunbeam said to the apple branch, "How much pleasure the dandelions give." "Yes, to children," said the branch. By and by an old woman came into the field. She had a basket and a knife. She wanted greens, some for herself and some to sell. "What a help the dandelions are to that old woman," said the sunbeam. "Yes," said the apple branch, "but people do not eat and make playthings of beautiful flowers." Just then the princess came into the room where the apple branch stood. Some friends came with her. The princess carried something very carefully in her hand. It was covered by 2 or 3 large leaves so that no wind could reach it. After the window was closed, the leaves were carefully opened. Then the princess held up, what do you suppose? The feathery seed crown of the dandelion. "Could anything be more beautiful?" said the princess. "See how light and airy it is, how wonderful God has made this little flower. I shall paint it with the apple branch, for both are so beautiful." As the princess began to paint the blossoms and the feathery dandelion, the sunbeam came in through the window and kissed both the dandelion and the apple branch. But over the apple blossoms there spread a rosy blush. What do you think about that? The apple blossom was beautiful, but so was the dandelion. So the apple blossom thought a little too highly of itself, didn't it? And didn't think that the dandelion was very pretty or useful, but indeed it was to a lot of people. Now, I believe we got time for one more story, which should finish up our Paths of Gold book. This is The Rat Princess. Once upon a time, there was a rat princess. She lived with her father, the Rat King, and her mother, the Rat Queen, in a rice field far away in Japan. The rat princess was so pretty that her father and mother were quite foolishly proud of her and thought that no one was good enough to play with her. When she grew up, they would not let any of the rat prince come around to visit her. They decided at last that no one should marry her till they had found the most powerful person in the whole world. No one else was good enough. The father rat started out to find the most powerful person in the whole world. The wisest and oldest rat in the rice field said that the sun must be the most powerful person because he made the rice grow and ripen. So the Rat King went to find the sun. He climbed the highest mountain, ran up the path of a rainbow, and traveled across the sky till he came to the sun's house. "What do you want, little brother?" the sun said when he saw him. "I come," said the Rat King very importantly, "to offer you the hand of my daughter, the princess, because you are the most powerful person in the world. No one else is good enough." "Ha ha," laughed the jolly round sun, and winked with his eye. "You are very kind, little brother, but if that is the case, the princess is not for me. The cloud is more powerful than I am. When he passes over me, I cannot shine." "Oh, indeed," said the Rat King. "Then you are not my man at all." And he left the sun without any more words, and the sun laughed and winked to himself, and the Rat King traveled across the sky till he came to the cloud's house. "What do you want, little brother?" sighed the cloud when he saw him. "I come to offer you the hand of my daughter, the princess," said the Rat King, "because you are the most powerful person in the world." The sun said so, and no one else is good enough. The cloud sighed again. "I am not the most powerful person," he said. "The wind is stronger than I. When he blows, I have to go wherever he sends me." "Then you are not the person for my daughter," said the Rat King proudly, and he started at once to find the wind. He traveled across the sky till he came at last to the wind's house at the very edge of the world. When the wind saw him coming, he laughed a big gusty laugh, "Ho, ho," and asked him what he wanted. When the Rat King told him that he had come to offer him the rat princess's hand because he was the most powerful person in the world, meaning he was offering her for marriage. The wind shouted a great gusty shout and said, "No, no, I am not the strongest. The wall that man has made is stronger than I. I cannot make him move with all my blowing. Go to the wall, little brother." And the Rat King climbed down the sky path again and traveled across the earth till he came to the wall. It was quite near his own rice field. "What do you want, little brother?" grumbled the wall when he saw him. "I come to offer you the hand of the princess, my daughter, because you are the most powerful person in the world, and no one else is good enough." "Ugh, ugh," grumbled the wall. "I am not the strongest. The big gray rat who lives in the cellar is stronger than I. When he gnaws and gnaws at me, I crumble, and at last I fall. Go to the rat, little brother." And so, after all over the world to find the strongest person, the Rat King had to marry his daughter to a rat after all. But the princess was very glad of it, for she had wanted to marry the gray rat all the time. So the Rat King thought that his job, nobody was good enough, and he searched high and low only to find out that's who she was meant to marry all along lived right there along with them in the same little town that they lived in. So that's all that we have time for today, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I thank you for joining Storytime with Nanny, and I want you to have a great, blessed day.